Sarab, you were one of the leaders of the demonstration today. What is your feel for the crowd and how well it went?
It was a great turnout. It was one of the things that touched my heart was the diversity of the crowd. People from all walks of life, representing really the diversity of New York City, came out in support today.
Now, you're Syrian yourself?
I'm Syrian American, yes.
Syrian American. Where is your family from?
Well, my family, my father originates from Hama, my mother's from Damascus, and I have a lot of family sprinkled all over the place right now.
Now, I want to talk about sort of a higher politics. Two words I didn't hear at the rally today were Russia and Iran. What do you think about their role in all of this?
Well, people in America like to talk about American intervention, but the reality in Syria is that from day one there was foreign intervention on the side of the Assad regime to deflect and suppress this uprising that we saw all around the country. The Russians from day one have been very supportive, not just in funding, but in military advisors and support that has led the Assad regime strategically to hit hard to destroy any sort of insurrection. The Iranians have allowed 20,000 proxy militiamen, foreign fighters, to come in the country to uphold the Assad regime. They've actually reorganized the ragtag bunches of Assad militias that existed into a national defense force. And both those nations are probably the core reason why the Assad regime hasn't fallen yet today.
When you say that they brought in 20,000, are you talking about Hezbollah or other people?
We're talking about foreign fighters from Lebanon under the leadership of Hezbollah, all the way to Iraq, to Pakistan, to Yemen, to Afghanistan. They're actually going into the refugee camps, Afghani refugee camps, and bringing those guys with promises of Iranian residency, telling them, hey, fight in Syria for a little bit, and if you survive, we'll give you residency. And they're just throwing masses of people who are in their own right desperate to fight against the Syrians in their struggle against the Assad regime.
I don't know if you know the Nation magazine. Are you familiar with it?
I'm familiar with it, yes.
Very famous liberal magazine, and I was stunned. There's an interview with Stephen Cohen where he says, shouldn't we admit the Russians were right about the Arab Spring, how it would only bring bad things? And he thinks the U.S. should cooperate with the Russians in them establishing an air base in Syria with a defensive perimeter. I don't know if you've seen it, or what do you think of it?
Article, but the Americans have been cooperating with the Russians on Syria. Here in America we have this illusion of support for the people of Syria, but yet every policy has been to contain the Syrian revolution rather than help it grow. For example, after the chemical weapons attack in 2013, the United States walked back from that red line and partnered with the Russians under the chemical weapons agreement and found a way to basically extend the rule of the Assad regime rather than target the Assad regime. Even today, the number one question that I ask of people here in America is, right now the United States controls the sky over Syria, yet every day the Assad regime is allowed to fly their helicopters and their planes, dropping bombs indiscriminately over Syrian towns and villages and cities. Yet the United States controls the skies, and why is that so? How come they're letting the Assad regime and their allies function in this matter? This is the key question that we need to ask our elected leadership here.
Also, not only liberals, but even further in the left, I think maybe half the left has this: Assad is anti-imperialist. The only thing we really should be opposing is the United States. What do you say to those people?
Imperialism and occupation and brutality comes in many forms, from the East and the West, right? From the Syria context, it's actually ludicrous that many people would think that Assad is, part of this axis of resistance, if you will. It's been a myth that they propagated over generations. Was Assad, or Hafiz al-Assad, part of the myth of resistance when he sent 20,000 Syrian soldiers to fight with George Bush Sr. against Iraq? Was the Assad regime, with the son Bashar, basically part of the axis of resistance when he worked with the American CIA rendition program, torturing many citizens of the world in Syria? I mean, we have to get beyond these kind of myths and confront the real issue here, that there was a popular uprising in Syria that has been brutally suppressed by the Assad regime with the support of their allies, namely the Russians and the Iranian regime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.